The sheer power of the animal's thrashing threatened to rip his arms from their sockets, yet he persevered. The elder men attempted to encircle it, struggling to keep their footing on the treacherously slippery mud after hours of relentless effort to liberate the terrified creature. Then, unexpectedly, Jim emitted a piercing cry. What had they unleashed? Jim Passmore resided in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, renowned for its awe-inspiring lakes, forests, wildlife, and mountains. Each day, as he strolled along the creek with his dogs, Jim felt fortunate to call this untamed place his home. However, one seemingly ordinary day turned into an encounter he could never have anticipated. Despite frequently venturing on walks and hikes with his dogs in the picturesque surroundings, they always followed a familiar path. They descended onto the well-trodden trail that had been carved out over the years, running parallel to the creek. Yet, just a few minutes into their routine walk, Jim's attention was drawn to an oddity as soon as they rounded the bend. There, amidst the tall grass and a clearing adjacent to the path, sat a peculiar object. As his dogs caught wind of it, they emitted a low growl and refused to budge. Jim felt a tug on their leads as he attempted to investigate, but the dogs staunchly held their ground, hackles raised. An eerie feeling enveloped the entire situation, leaving Jim perplexed and on edge. As much as Jim tried, his dog refused to move, knowing that they were going to make his investigation difficult and worrying that there could be something potentially dangerous up ahead. He decided to take them back home. He took the dogs all the way back home, dropped them off, and raced back to the spot down the creek. Just as the sight came to view, he decided to proceed with caution. Jim slowly approached a mischievous object that was becoming clearer with each step. At first, it looked like a big gray plastic box. As he drew near, a terrible smell hit him along with a strange revelation. It was no box, it was an animal grade. What was it doing out here? Jim cautiously peered inside, and a chill raised up his spine. Inside was a filthy blanket and heavy chain, but the door of the crate was open. Someone had changed something inside this box. Whatever it was, it had gotten out. Jim inspected the crate a little more closely and noticed a gigantic bite mark on one side. Jim had heard stories of the illegal exotic animal trade in the area. He knew he had to leave. Whatever was in the grate could still be here. Just as he turned around, he felt something watching him. Jim's heart raised and his hands began to sweat. He felt the adrenaline kick in as his body ready, self to fight or flee. He could feel something was watching him from the trees. He raised his arms over his head and yelled, trying to make himself look bigger. Suddenly, there was a rustling nearby and something emerged. He made eye contact for a brief moment, then it scrambled away. Something about this whole encounter was just off. The beaver that had carried into the bushes was very odd, but something told Jim that he had to follow it. Why had his dog refused to approach the crate? And now why was there a beaver that seemed like it wanted him to follow it? Jim walked after it. Strangely, it didn't seem frightened of him, but where was it leading him? What did it want? The beaver reached the bank of the creek and stopped. Jim felt his feet sink into the soggy ground underneath him. There was nothing here but a dangerous mud trap. What was he even doing here? His legs felt like lead as he turned to go back up the embankment. But then he heard a strange sound. With a wet trash, something large was moving. If it's a brown mound in the water just off the bank, it was clearly struggling. Jim's curiosity got the better of him as he rushed to see what it was. Then he realized that it was an animal trapped in the mud. Jim didn't hesitate, but he had no idea what kind of creature he was dealing with. After he spent a few minutes studying it, Jim realized that the creature, just like the one who had led him, there must be a giant beaver. Beavers were extremely common in this area. It all seemed like it made complete sense to Jim now. Poor creature stuck in a mud trap was unable to free itself, and Jim rallied a few friends together and they all got to work to save the beaver. But the group had forgotten one very important detail about the creature. This beaver was no different from any other beaver. They are incredibly territorial and have even known to attack humans. As the rescue party approached, the animal lashed out and managed to bite one of Jim's friends. To everyone's alarm, the man rushed to the hospital as there was a chance that the animal was carrying rabies. The remaining men remained to try to free the animal. Jim came up with an ingenious plan to avoid another bite. Jim didn't know how long the poor animal had been trapped for, and was obviously feeling vulnerable and under a lot of stress. He decided that he had covered the animal's eye, so he removed his jersey and wrapped it securely around the creature's head. The beaver struggled at first, but then it started to calm down. The men could now work faster around the beaver, but there was still one problem. No matter how hard they pushed, the animal wouldn't budge. Jim and his team tried to take around the beaver, but because it was half submerged in the water, their efforts proved to be useless. In their quest to rescue the trapped animal, they devised a plan to employ a pulley system. Jim realized the solution and secured a rope around the creature, hoping it would work. However, they soon discovered a significant flaw in their strategy. The beaver remained immovable, firmly stuck in the mud despite their relentless efforts. Days passed, and just as their hope waned, they felt a slight movement from the animal. Determined, they exerted their utmost strength in one last tremendous effort, and finally, the beaver was raised to safety. But as Jim wiped away the mud from its face, he was taken aback. The creature was not a beaver at all. Underneath the layers of grime and dirt, there stood a trembling sheepdog, a frightened canine they had been dealing with all along. Jim stood in astonishment, mud still clinging to his face. Realizing his misunderstanding, the most astonishing revelation was that the beaver, who had led him there, had known the true nature of the trapped animal all along but still sought assistance. Surprisingly, despite being stuck for some time, the dog was in a satisfactory condition. This new information required a different approach. Releasing the dog into the wild, as one would with a beaver, was no longer an option. Jim had a clear plan in mind. He immediately contacted the Oklahoma Alliance for Animals, and they swiftly took charge of the dog's well-being. However, a significant hurdle presented itself. Teddy, as the dog was named due to his large and affectionate appearance, harbored intense anger towards people. The rescue organization would need to invest extensive time and effort to rebuild Teddy's trust in humans. It was a challenging task that lay ahead. Meanwhile, the local veterinarian delivered discouraging news. Teddy was grappling with a severe weight issue, necessitating additional attention and care. The unfortunate pup received a diagnosis of morbid obesity, likely the reason behind his entrapment and inability to free himself from the muddy embankment. Teddy's excessive weight also caused considerable strain on his joints, hindering his mobility. Furthermore, there were suspicions that Teddy had endured days of being stuck in the creek, resulting in mild PTSD. Despite these challenges, there was a glimmer of hope. Remarkably, Teddy formed a special bond with a particular woman, the shelter receptionist, who had managed to earn his trust. Over time, Teddy allowed her to approach and even cuddle him, a breakthrough that filled the shelter workers with optimism. Recognizing Teddy's progress and growing comfort with people, the shelter made a decision. It was time to advertise Teddy for adoption. Although he was believed to be an 8-year-old senior dog, which might have presented challenges in finding a home, people were undeterred by his age. The public flocked to meet Teddy, and after 10 months since his traumatic ordeal, he finally found his forever home.